Nothing goes, but super excited to have him. You're not, so you were in, I'll just let you tell your story.
You can ask questions afterwards. During, I mean, you can ask how it goes.
A little bit of your background, getting the job and where you're at now.
Yeah.
That's changed, obviously.
Yeah, my job's, life's different from where I started a long time ago. So I'll just give you my background. So I was at Utah State, and then I studied math and statistics. It was a composite major, and then I did a minor in finance. So I took classes from Paul and Ryan, everybody else, to get that. I almost switched my major actually to finance directly after I took one of my math classes, but got talked that I shouldn't and stuck with what I did. Really happy with that. So graduated in about 2015. I did an internship with Ace Insurance, actually. That was back in New Jersey, in the middle of a town that no one would know. It's not a town that, it literally was surrounded by trees and you could never see it unless you knew where it was. It was the office I actually did my internship in. But I did that for a division of Ace, which was International Personal Lines. And then I came back and finished up my degree, and they ended up offering me a position out there. It's the one I chose, actually. I actually had a few offers coming out, which was really lucky. And then I actually went out and started working there for the same division, which was International Personal Lines, which we can get into the details of what insurance is after that. But now, as my career has moved on, I actually was more on the business side of that division. And then I ended up going into analytics and predictive modeling, which fits a little bit more of my background to some degree. And through that, I was doing international work, initially for financial lines, did something for liability. And now I actually I'm a senior data analyst, and I actually lead all analytics to some degree for Chubb overall. So that's North America and overseas. So just to give you guys, just as a question, has anybody ever heard of Chubb before today? Okay, what do you know about Chubb and how did you hear about them? Okay, what about you? They are insurance, but why do you so just to give you some background, Chubb is the largest publicly traded insurance company in the world, right? We operate in over 54 countries and territories, and they employ over 34,000 people. So being such a big company, why do you guys think you never hear of them? No, everything's written, so an insurance company holds it. What do you guys think? Yeah. Not in the US, that's why. So we actually do a lot of home and auto. We just don't do a lot of mass home and auto, which is us. So Chubb is actually one of the does a lot of home and auto, but they do it for the high net worth individuals. And they were one of the leading insurers for that level of division. If you go into other countries like Mexico, they actually are like the number 3 auto insurer in Mexico. So they're massive internationally in areas.
Do they go by Chubb in Mexico?
They do. So like I mentioned, if you guys caught, I actually worked for Ace when I did my internship. Ace bought Chubb and took their name, which is a little unique, right? So I started work in May, and in July, so 2 months after I worked, is when they announced that they were buying Chubb, which was the biggest acquisition in insurance that's ever happened, which was massive. So I was so new to the industry, it wasn't like a big shockwave to me, but now that I'm there, I realized that was a big merger, and it actually worked out really well, mostly for me because the initial Chubb wasn't heavily invested in international. They were heavily invested in middle market and high net worth, and Ace was very invested in major accounts and international. So the merge actually worked really well for us and didn't really hurt my position in any way. So yeah, I'm going to keep it relatively simplistic, to be honest, because I want to hear from you guys, because to be honest, it wasn't very long ago that I was in your guys' position, because walking through these halls brought back a lot of good memories. And if you think about it, I graduated in 2015. It's 2022. It's only been 7 years from my position to yours. And hypothetically, right? Granted, I know you guys aren't ready to graduate, but it's not really a big gap between time where I remember sitting exactly in your spots and having somebody come from a company and tell their experiences and how they got there. So I will give a little bit introduction of what insurance is and what they do. A lot of us kind of already understand insurance, or we feel like we already understand insurance, and most of us think it's extremely boring. That was usually what I get told when it was time to go for insurance. The word I get is insurance is boring because how hard is it to write a home or an auto or anything that way, right? And our exposure is what we have to do for insurance alone, right? We all have to have homeowners insurance. Well, technically we should, and we should all have auto insurance guaranteed by law, right? If you drive a car. So insurance is kind of integrated into our culture extremely tightly that you don't sometimes recognize where it is. But I always see insurance as being the oil in your economy. When something happens, take Hurricane Ian that just hit Florida, how do you rebuild after something like that? Infrastructure, homes, livelihoods. Most people don't have that type of cash to be able to do it, and you hear people's lives are ruined, right? Because, of that type of a horrifying event. What does insurance do? It comes in and it helps rebuild and give the capital and the money for these people who have paid for it to rebuild. It keeps economies running. It keeps things flowing. It keeps companies running, right? It's awesome. It's a great and cool thing when you really think about what insurance is. We just take it for granted because it's all around us. You really like it when you need it. You hate paying for it every day. Every time a bill comes due and you have to pay your insurance premiums, you hate it, but you sure love it when you have an incident or something that comes about it. So, taking that for what it is, that's kind of a brief story of how I got to where I was in some short manners of at least how I got there. Do you guys have any questions initially?
You're originally in New Jersey for ACE, and then
Chubb was still in New Jersey. So I actually now, lucky me, I actually now work remotely completely. Now, recently changed that. But it's actually not much different than from what I was doing initially, just because I was doing so much international work, worked with a lot of people in London. How do you communicate with people in London when you're based on the East Coast? What do you guys think? How would I communicate with them? Yeah, over the phone, all the time. Anytime I did anything, it was always over the phone, especially during COVID. Really impacted, any travel or anything that would have happened. So my livelihood ever since I initially started with Chubb, I've never been in the same office as my boss. I've never fully met everybody I've worked with. It's always almost been 100% virtual. Now that I help manage the North America department of analytics, I get to meet a lot more people that I work with, get a little bit more experience that way. But COVID changed a lot of things within the business, to be honest. Chubb is a work from office company. That's what our CEO will always claim, and it will claim to be going forward. But the flexibility that's offered for employees, which I always felt was there, is immense. And so if you go to the office one day, it's not guaranteed you're going to run into the people that you work with. And analytics, our department is spread over 3 different offices. So every time I go back east, I'm in between Jersey and Philadelphia. And most of the time I work with multiple people, even some people in international situations. So
over COVID, did you go fully remote, or was it?
It was over COVID, but I had approval to do it way before then. I just never took it up. So that was kind of the big one. Do you guys have any questions?
I do.
Yep.
As you're talking about working remotely in.
What does my day-to-day look like? I'll give you 2 day-to-day work lives because my work life has actually been different from when I started until it is today. So initially when I got into it, I was really into the business. So I was really into data and numbers, and I would go in and it was more we have this problem, or there's something that we want to solve, and how do we come up with a solution to it? So it was getting data and managing it. So I was a business analyst initially and was working through that data, and then finding solutions mostly via BI dashboards. So business intelligence tools like ClickView, Tableau, stuff like that, that a lot of people use, and being able to deliver that to the business and to those who were running the business initially. So when I actually started, so that's kind of what it looked like, right? Initially it was, we have this problem, we want to make this process more efficient. How do we do it? And we go about it. Now that I manage more analytics, mine is more helping the analysts who do that type of work know how to do it, right? And so it's a complete swap. I used to be writing code, doing a bunch of stuff all the time, coming up with these solutions via code my way. And now it's me being able to trust somebody to be able to do it, and then getting those results and helping them understand the implications of those results. So it's kind of a flip-flop of where I was and where I am now. So yeah, that was a really good question. Anything else? Hold on. I'm pulling up some things that I had. So, you know, one thing so we actually have a few people from USU who actually work for Chubb. So I actually have one of my direct reports actually not work from Chubb, but came from USU. But he actually is also from the same thing. And I asked him some questions because I told him I was coming to Utah State. He was jealous, by the way, because he was obviously his name's Chase Weber. But so he reports to me, he hasn't been with the company as long, but I always asked him, I was like, if you had something to tell the students from USU about insurance, it's like, what's the main thing that you would tell them? And he's like, that insurance isn't as boring as you think it is. Okay. You hear about these big firms and things that we get to be able to do, insurance just sounds really, really boring. When I was first in my math and stat department, I took some actuarial classes. Have you guys know what an actuary is? Does anybody know what an actuary is? What is it? Yeah, you're a risk analyst. That's what they do. And they help sell price. So for insurance companies, they actually are the ones who set the price for insurance companies. So they're very certified to be able to say, this is the price that we're going to be able to charge. Getting an actuary degree is like getting a PhD in actuarial science. It's a long process. It's not very easy, but the pay is great, right? And the work-life balance is really good if you want to go that route. But, I took an actuarial class and I was like in college and I said, this is so boring, this information that I'm going through. I never want to touch insurance ever again in my life. And then I ended up getting my internship through Chubb, through ACE, and totally changed my perspective of what insurance really was, because it really is, it's a business. It's not something that's very easy. They have their same problems as any business does. They have their profit, they're trying to make money, but it's very defined. They live in a very regulatory environment as well. Governments tell them what they can and they can't not do, what they can charge, what they can't charge, and they have to work with those limitations, and you get to come up with solutions of how do you fix and make it better. So when I first started, one of my first projects was actually doing catastrophic modeling and managing that process. So Chubb initially wanted to know, where are our risks? When a hurricane comes, this was mostly for Mexico. When a hurricane hits Mexico, what's our exposure? How much money do we have insured? And what's our potential loss? And when I first started, Chubb couldn't answer that question, which blows my mind because insurance, you think everything's kind of driven by data nowadays, but they couldn't really answer that question easily and quickly. So my whole process was be able to, my first project that I worked for months on was getting that process set up and helping answer that question. So when a hurricane hit, or even a potential aspect of a hurricane hit, we could map it out and we could tell you exactly to the penny how much money we were going to lose if everything was hit at a maximum amount, which is massive. It was so fun. It was so enjoyable to do it, right? It was taking a problem that needed to be solved and being able to find a solution. And you don't see that on the outside of an insurance company because all you think is, oh, they just pay claims and you have service and you have adjusters. But there's a whole other side outside of those people who you have face-to-face with, agents, brokers, whatever. Behind that, there's people who make the decisions for the business and how it runs, right? Those are the people that part of insurance is extremely exciting. I had a coworker once who was probably one of my, really looked up to him, and he always told me, he's like, he worked in the insurance industry for like over 30 years. And he said, every day he would wake up excited to go to work, because that is the level of excitement that there really can be within an insurance company. And to top it off, Chubb by itself is, in my opinion, the top of the line of insurance companies when it comes to culture and their diligence in what they do in a writing company and what they're willing, they're extremely profitable. A writing company. So when I say writing company, is that they just write insurance is what it means. So that's what they do, is they write the policies and the risks that come through. But one thing that they do, they kind of, there's certain key indicators that insurance companies go by. And if you ever to look up their financials, they always kind of talk about a combined ratio. So insurance companies can make money in two ways. One is called underwriting income, and the other one is off investment income. And so there's kind of like two splits of insurance, right? So what our company really thrives itself on is that we make money on both sides. We make money on our underwriting and we make money on our investments. So we never technically lose money as an overall whole. So Chubb, I think they just barely came out with their third quarter results. I think their combined ratio was 87 point something or something like that. So that means a combined ratio, what it means is every dollar of premium we write, we made 13 cents. So mass that out, and that's a lot of money, right? So some of the analytics that we help do, some of the divisions that I help run analytics on, some of their portfolios are $500 million a piece. So take 13 cents, times it by that $500 million worth of premium, and that tells you what your revenue is going to be out just on underwriting. And then all that money that they get, they go invest it because they have to have certain cash reserves to be able to pay their claims, and that money sits and it grows in a very safe, at least Chubb did it, in a safe environment. They can put it in risky investments if they want, but Chubb usually doesn't do that. And then whatever they don't use becomes profit for the business as well. So there's two aspects of revenue for an insurance company, but Chubb is very diligent in that we will get a profit for the risk that we attain. An adjusted risk profit is what we determine that is worth it, right? That's what we feel like we deserve when writing a risk. And that's why Chubb, if you go look at their combined ratio versus any other, you could even take the mass residentials, but you would usually go to Hartford or it's off the top of my head. There's another one in the US, can't think of it off the top of my head. But you go look at their combines and they're great. They're still good for their industries, but we're at the top of the line. We are what everybody shoots for. And it just shows that Chubb really knows how to write their business and they do it well. We're expensive, but we pride ourselves on the service that we provide clients, that the claims that we're able to pay and the way that we're able to write and the people that we have in it. And the culture within Chubb is it is phenomenal. I've never not enjoyed working with anybody, which has been kind of unique. I feel like everybody kind of talks like, oh, could have bad managers, and they're in Chubb. I know they are because I've talked to some people, but within my division and within my experience, I've never met anyone who hasn't been self-determined and willing to just go at it and go to work, right? And it's been such a great culture to be there because it pushes you to be better, right? I think any culture that's going to make you want to be better, that pushes you to grow, to get better, that's the type of culture that I would always look for, right? Somebody who's going to push you, they care for you. I am in the position I am today, partly because I pushed. It was totally my decisions in the end that got me to where it was, but it was also the people that I worked for that helped me get there, right? it wasn't me fully alone, but it sure was. It definitely, a lot of it's definitely you. You want to take your career somewhere, you have to take it. And I was in a situation where it was really, I could have left Chubb. I had another offer in another company, and I went and talked to my boss, and my boss was like, you know what? There's more opportunity here for you. I can't, this is a better spot for you. Your opportunities are better. They laid it out. I decided to stay. The pay at the other job was actually better initially, but my payoff, that was 2 years ago. And my pay, just the benefit of that has been tenfold just by willing to stay. And because of my hard work and everything else that I was able to put forth, it's paid off dividends that I couldn't even imagine that the other company could never have done in any shape, way, or form, right? The exposure that we get, especially being an international company, I get to work with people out of Europe, out of Asia. I get to talk to them on a consistent basis. I get an aspect of their culture and how to work with people internationally. What company gives you that opportunity right out of college, right? Not many that I know of. Sometimes you're just sitting at a desk. You don't get to communicate with the business. You don't get to make those type of decisions, but that's not how it is within Chubb. When the first day I was working, I was talking to people out of Brazil and Mexico and Indonesia and Malaysia and Australia. Talking to Asia Pacific is kind of painful being on the US side because they're night calls, but that type of experience doesn't come everywhere. And that was one of the best things that I ever got to have exposure to within Chubb, is just being able to talk to different people and having different experiences, right? And thinking of my career as within Chubb itself, right? There's certain things that I think, to get where I am today, I think there's certain things that have made me stand out more than some of my colleagues that I think if I was in your spot, something that I would definitely want to do, right? And I get this all the time when I talk to people. If you really think about where the world's going, any industry, not even taking insurance, any industry, I always feel the thing that they talk about the most is data and data-driven decisions, right? People make decisions based on data, right? That's where most of it comes through. And if you don't know how to work, manipulate, or even understand data structures, you're going to be at a disadvantage in some ways, shape, or form, right? I don't really care what your career is. I work with underwriters who technically don't even care what the data is, and underwriters are people who write our business. They're the ones who are facing with the clients and working with the brokers and the agents, but they themselves are encouraged to be more analytical and being able to make decisions based on the data that they see. And to be honest, the decisions that we make at a company and what I do as an analyst is we help set prices or help people understand what a good risk is, what a bad risk is. And that's just data points. It's saying a good risk is this because of this and this and this, because we figured that in a statistical model, right? We hand that over to the insurer and the underwriters, and they get to make those decisions. But if they don't understand those data points and they don't understand how it was calculated, they're at a disadvantage and they don't understand it. Yeah.
So when you talk about predictive modeling in insurance, are you doing regression or like decision or like classification, like decision?
It depends on what you're trying to answer, to be honest.
You said price, right?
Prices are usually they're linear models, they're GLMs, usually is what they're going to be used to price out. But to get there, you are going to be using classification models, and there's all these different. Price is usually a GLM because of the way that they're structured. But there's, like I said, there's stuff outside of pricing that insurance companies are trying to do. So one example is Chubb is really trying to make it easier for agents and brokers to write business. So I don't know if you guys noticed, but when you go to an insurance agent or broker, they ask you 1,000 questions. What's your address? How often do you drive? What's your make and model of your car? They ask you a lot of questions because they want those data points, and that's how they price you. We live in a world where everything is easily accessible from the web, and a lot of things that Chubb wants to do is make that process a lot simpler. So it's like a one question thing. You give us your name and your address, and we populate everything else based on what we can scrape from the web. This goes from businesses and everything else. And so it's kind of like a one question thing. And that's where your classification goes. That's where your your natural language learning algorithms go, your machine learning, your deep learning, all that stuff. And Chubb does it because they want to make the process and they want to be able to be more efficient in writing their business, right? And they don't want to trust people to input data because, to be honest, we suck at inputting data because it's horrible. We're horrible at it. There's so many problems that way. But yeah, that's kind of what we do with statistical models. Any other questions?
I know, how much was that? Do you remember how much the exposure was in Mexico from a hurricane? This scale, like how much exposure did you get that?
Oh, well, initially we had a lot and then they cut it down pretty heavily.
Like just in terms of what's a lot, like with Chubb.
Well, it's so hard because it depends on what division you're talking about, but you're talking millions of dollars in premium.
Yeah.
Yeah, like massive, massive losses. And so the reason that they started doing it is because they had before I came on, they had a hurricane hit Baja California area, and those are very ritzy areas, and they didn't manage that very well, and underwriters just wrote it like crazy, and so it hit, and Chubb lost a ton of money. And so which when you lose a lot of money, your CEO gets attention, and they wanted to know why, and that's why the whole CAT modeling initiative really kicked off, and it was like, where are our risks? How much exposure do we have? And then that aspects of it. But yeah. And any other questions? But yeah, so kind of going back into it, knowing data is really, really important. And people always talk about Excel's going away and they're going to be different tools. I haven't seen it yet, but I would definitely get familiar with any link. SQL has made my life so much easier. I just took one SQL class. It was the base one. Well, I think it was the second one because I passed the first one with getting approval. But any basic understanding of data and how it's pulled and where it's coming from and how to manipulate it. Excel's the same way. It's just a database that you're going to be able to do, and you're just using formulas and things to join data and put things together and create a story. That's really what you do with data, is you create a story to tell somebody what's really going on. So what I do in data analytics and predictive modeling is we take data, we put it through statistical models, and we tell a story like women are better drivers than men, because it's technically true, historically, always. I don't know why, but it is. For some reason, women are always better when it comes to losses and driving. And it also kind of goes into home ownership as well. Like there's a lot of things that we find out, some things we can't write because of regulatory reasons and ethical reasons. You can't put a price to it, but we find that's what we do. We find stories with the data, and then we make business decisions based on those stories. And it's really just risk classification. How do you determine if you are a good risk or you're a bad risk, right? What data points make those different, right? That's what I do pretty much all the time, except I help manage people who do it now, right? And I do it in my own way. It's just different. I'm not always in the code, but
When you say in the code, what type of code are they writing? What the language?
We've switched. We used to write a lot in SAS, dabbled in R, but Python's everywhere. If I was to say a language I'd learn Python and I'd learn SQL. Those were the two languages I would always learn right now, especially the way it's going. I see Python everywhere, and that's a basis of everything. I don't hear R hardly ever. Maybe if I was to go talk to the math and stat department, maybe I'd hear R more, but Python it's just got so much functionality to it. It's open source. There's a lot of power that can be happening in Python. And if I was to learn some basics, you'll never know what you're going to be asked, right? I work with people who don't have my statistical and mathematical background, but they work in predictive analytics, right? You don't have to always have the background of where you're going to be. A lot of the people I work with had like liberal arts or something random, and they're working in aspects that, their degree doesn't fit, right? But because of their experiences and because of their work ethic, they are able to learn and get to where they wanted to be and do what they want, right? But they also had to have the background to do it. Your degree, to me, is always a step in the door, and then you get to pave your way after that, right? But granted, it's the door you want to step in. That's why your degree really matters. Depends on where you want to go. Yeah.
What advice would you give us, and not I guess specifically if we want to go into insurance specifically,
I guess just advice in general. Really.
Data would still be my advice.
Yeah.
Still get involved. Yeah, because I think it's everywhere. Outside of that, I think, work ethic and being able to be independent and trusted, right? That's key. That's huge for me. And I don't think that's just outside of Chubb, but it's really important that you know when to ask questions, but you're not asking questions all the time. You're willing to go find the answers. Like, it drives me nuts when I have an employee who comes in and says, how do I do this? Or what am I doing now? I want this next step. Give me this next step. Give me this next step. I want to give you, I don't want to micromanage you. I don't want to tell you everything you want to do. I don't want to be told that, right? I think as an advice, I think even in your classes, when you're asked to do something, you have to be independent and you have to be willing to find solutions, right? That goes into the workforce as well. You have to be able to say, here's a problem. I need to find a solution. And you also need to be able to think outside of the box. And that's why you guys take a bunch of different classes and you get a more broad thing, but you need to think, what is the impact of my choices and what's going on? Sometimes I feel like we get into a mode, especially in college, because I was there. What do I need to do to get my A? And that's all I cared about, right? But there's so much, like when you're in a workforce, it's not, what do I need to get an A? The A doesn't exist anymore, right? The real question is, what do I need to do for this project to make it successful? And what's the broader goal of this project? You understand that and you can come up with, and that gives you solutions, and you are able to come to the table with discussion points to be able to talk to people and being intelligent about it, right? And being able to come up and say, this is the project that I'm working on. This is what I see. Maybe this is a better solution. That is so much more impressive to me than somebody who's just willing to do exactly what I asked them to do, right? And it's the same thing. Like, sometimes we just get so focused and narrow-minded on what we're looking to do and what we want that we miss the big picture. And I see it all the time, and it drives me nuts. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, because I miss those big pictures sometimes, but out of anything, I always get asked when a decision is made, what's the impact? How is that going to benefit us, right? And I have to have those answers. And you can't just do that by doing task after task after task. That's not how it works. Does that help? Anything else? Yeah.
Brian, how you drop that of an actuary?
Yeah, so I work with actuaries all the time. But our statistical models that we do can be anything. They're not just pricing, right? So even if we come up with a pricing model, okay, so say we come up with this model and it helps determine that this characteristic and this characteristic and this characteristic, those determine losses, right? So like, I'll give you a few examples. Like, your prior loss experience is huge, right? Your exposure, which is, it could be multiple things. It could be how many cars you have. It could be the revenue, the size of your business. That's going to indicate how many claims an insurance company is going to get, right? If you're a bigger company, you're going to bring more claims to us, right? Versus a smaller company, right? If you have more prior claims experience, it's a real strong indicator that you're going to have another claim with us again, right? If you don't have any claims in the prior experience, chances are you're a really good risk, right? So we have these specific indicators that go through, right? And we end up working with the actuaries and say, here are the indicators that help classify a risk really good. Here are the price points that we would give, right? Based on the statistical model. And they take that and then they make actuarial judgment and things, and then they move and do that, right? So there are divisions with insurance that actuaries and predictive modelers are the exact same thing, but within Chubb, they're separate out. All right, any other questions?
Let me back up a little bit. You said Excel and then Python.
I'd go, well, I think it depends on where you're at.
Yeah, I mean, so that's what I was gonna say, in terms of how much do you see in each, or what are you seeing? I mean, obviously, when you were on the other end of it,
It was
as an analyst.
a lot of Excel.
Okay, more Excel on that end.
Yeah, but it was definitely going to the coding aspect. The reason I say you need both is because Excel doesn't answer questions. When you get to big data, sometimes Excel is clunky and slow, and it is just a pain in the neck to work with. Like, I hate Excel and I love it, right? The quick and easy way to do analysis is awesome, and it's so easy, and it's a great tool. right? But if I want to go look at something that's, say, 500,000 rows, and I want to go do like a VLOOKUP or anything like that, I don't use VLOOKUPs, by the way, but if I did anything on that type of a data set in Excel, I might as well just shut my computer down for 30 minutes and not worry about it, right? My computer, my personal computer, doesn't have the processing power to handle that, right? And it's annoying. So where do I go? I go to a coding process that I can do it, and I can do it quickly, and I can get the answers that people need. And that's why I say you need both, because Excel has a limit in what it can do and in functionality, and code and being able to dive that way doesn't, right? You can throw millions of records into code, and you can code it, and you can get an answer a lot more quickly than you can if you were trying to do that in a clunky tool like Excel, right? And that's where, like, any type of analysis I did in Excel was taking it from data sources, slimming it down, and putting it in Excel to do it, and looking at it more in a detailed aspect, or being able to see it, right? And that's where it came through. Like, and I think it depends. I know some people who only work out of Excel, but most of their data sets that they get are really tiny, and they're just answering basic questions, and they're looking at summaries. Stuff that I do is not that way. So I think it depends on where you go, but understanding that there's other tools out there outside of Excel to help answer those questions, I think is really, really powerful and beneficial as you go out. And I've always been asked, with even in my experience, to, I've been asked to do things that are completely out of my comfort zone and stuff that I have no idea about. Even when I went into the business myself, I didn't know anything about insurance. I knew nothing about the industry. Really, I thought I did. I thought I knew what I was getting myself into, and I didn't, right? And I think that goes in a lot of ways as we get into any industry or anything class that you go into. Sometimes you just don't know it. And the real question goes in, how do you learn it and excel in it, right? I think that's the type of, I don't know, I can't even describe it accurately, but you will all be asked to do things that you don't have any experience in, and you don't know how to do it. You didn't have a class on it. You never got taught to do it, right? But how would you go about learning it? And how would you go about answering those problems? Would you just throw your hands up in the air and say, you know what, screw it, I don't want to do it. We'll just push it on to somebody else, right? Or are you willing to go figure it out and ask the questions and be willing to reach out to the people that can help you answer it? My experience, specifically being in the business side of things, most people want you to succeed, right? Because they were in a position that you were in, and somebody helped them succeed. And so they kind of want to return the favor in some ways, right? I want people that I work with to succeed because I had people help me to succeed. But for me to help them succeed, they've got to be able to reach out, and it comes from them, right? You can push and push and push, and it doesn't get you anywhere, right? Willingness to succeed and that type of stuff, that comes totally from you, not from those you work with, right? That's where it comes from. It doesn't go anywhere else, right? And so that's why I say, like, your main driver of your career and your path of whatever you guys choose to do, it's you. You have to make those choices. You have to have those tough conversations. You have to be willing to talk to people to be able to have those tough conversations. And I've had tough conversations about pay, about places I was in the company, and they are not easy conversations to have with your employers and those you work with, but they have been the best conversations I've had. And they are the reason I am where I am now, is because I was willing to have tough conversations about stuff I didn't know or I wasn't comfortable with to get it figured out. Those are powerful conversations, to be able to have those and be willing to do them, I think are really, really important. So when does this class get out?
Whatever, but like 2:30.
Whenever you guys want. So one thing that, do you guys have any questions? Quiet ones today. I remember being in your spot. I was quiet too, so I won't judge you based on that. One thing that I'm going to advocate for Chubb specifically that I think that you guys should recognize, and there's certain things that I think, as I look back on my experiences, that I wish everybody would have a willingness to do, is what the biggest thing that made the biggest difference in my career was that I was willing to leave and get out of my comfort zone and go to New Jersey and do an internship, right? I would encourage every single one of you to take an experience that puts you completely out of your comfort zone, right? Especially going, if you have an opportunity to leave and go to a different state and be all by yourself, do it. You won't regret it. You might hate it, but you won't regret it. I didn't hate it. I loved it. It was great, right? But that experience, like if I could put like a pinnacle of where I was in college to where I am today, that was my key moment of change. Was I was willing to put myself in a very uncomfortable situation and take it and run with it. Because I had an internship in Salt Lake, I had an internship with Goldman Sachs, and I had an internship opportunity with ACE. And I'll tell you what, that one was the most uncomfortable one to take because I was leaving, I wasn't familiar with the area, and I didn't know anything really what I was getting myself into. And I still remember pulling into Jersey, trying to find a spot, getting a place to live, trying to integrate into that lifestyle. It was tough. It was really, really tough. But it was the biggest change in my life that got me to where I am today. So if I have any encouragement for you, one, you should get an internship because everybody should have an internship because it makes a big difference. And it just gets you into the experience of thinking outside of a classroom and what a business actually is, right? Specifically, if you can. And the other one, leave. Go somewhere that's kind of uncomfortable and make sure that you're applying for those type of positions that are uncomfortable for you, right? Don't just look for a home office kind of thing. Like those are great and they're going to give you great experiences. But I think your best experiences that you can get are things that are completely out of the norm and are going to push you more than other places, right? It's going to make you figure out your life. It's going to make you figure out what you want. I think we all work to live, don't live to work. I know some people who live to work, but I think most of us work to live, and you need to figure out what that means, right? And I think putting yourself out of your comfort zone makes you really answer those type of questions, right? They made me answer them, and they made me really think about what I wanted. When I was doing that internship in Jersey, it really was, if I got a position here, would I take it? Do I like this type of a situation? Would I move here? Would I do that type of stuff? And the answer was, yeah, I would, right? But I would never have had that experience if I never would have taken it up. I would have still been doing what I do, right? I don't know, actually, I know what company I'd actually probably been working for now, but I don't think I would have enjoyed it. And I don't think my experiences would have been nearly as enjoyable as it would have come through. So, Paul, actually,
Is it career trip? I don't remember.
I did do the career trip. I did do the career trip. And that was actually the initial standpoint was like, you know what? You've got to be willing to do something, right? And it was really the biggest reason I took that internship was mostly because of connections I had and the way I got exposed to it. So I was looking for a ton of internships and, initially nothing was really coming out of it. And so, I was working with Paul and he knew I was interested in something. And Paul's like, here's an internship. It's at ACE because John Thompson was the connection there. But before Paul would even give me any details about it, he says, are you willing to do it? Right. That was the key decision maker there. He's like, are you willing? If I give you this information and I, help tell you about it, are you willing to do it? Because if I wasn't willing to do it, he wasn't going to tell me about it. And that's where it came from.
When you supply if you're not really going to go.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And he was kind of putting his neck out in some ways, and John was in some ways to take somebody, and it was a big risk because they've never taken anybody. But I would say, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I was the first one from USU, and there's been 2 other people who have been able to do, there's been actually multiple internships, and they've also hired 2 other people. And so I'd like to think that I was the gateway into that aspect of it, that career path for a lot of people, but they had to stand up by their own, but I was the first that way from outside of John, but John went through the Hartford and went around, but that way. So, I think USU has a lot of good qualities that you guys learn in the schools that people look for, right? I think being from a small town, sometimes you're discounted, but you shouldn't be. And it's hard too, in some ways, like if you guys want to go back east, there's a lot of colleges back east. I know that's where they usually hire, but it's not true. You can make it to where you want to be. If you want to be on the East Coast and if you've ever done or had the opportunity to do the career trip that USU offers, you should do it, right? It just gives you exposure to what's actually really out there outside of what your normal is, right? To see what opportunities are out there those are really fun. I actually really liked that trip. Gave me a lot of exposure. We didn't meet Chubb at that time. John never did those.
I was gonna say, because then maybe it was the next year, actually, it turned into a trip where we would go visit Chubb almost every year.
I know.
And it was kind of an opportunity.
Yeah. I don't think you guys have gone back. Have you guys done it yet?
Well, since, I haven't done it since COVID, so it's been a couple of years.
Yeah, it's been a while. I don't think they've held it because New York's been shut down for quite a while. So, but yeah, but yeah, the opportunities. I think when it comes to getting those opportunities, like I talk about getting an internship and stuff like that, it's always easy to say and hard to do. I think the biggest key there is you need to know you need to be willing to work with people, right? It's networking. It's what it is. Networking goes so far. I always tell people it's who you know, not what you know, that gets you where you want to go. And there's a lot of truth to that. Networking is massive, and being willing to connect to people and being willing to talk to them and being willing to reach out and say, this is what I'm interested in, and being an advocate for yourself, that's where you're going to go and being able to get those opportunities. Paul was in that aspect. He was kind of my main key network aspect that got me to a lot of places I needed to. And then over time, I've got more and more. And now my network is a lot broader and my opportunities are a lot more. I have a lot more opportunities to go different places. But it all starts with just getting to know people who care and see that that you are determined, that you mean it, and they'll help you out. And they can help you give ideas and where you're going to go, but networking is massive. Getting to know people, getting their ideas, it's really, really important. Did you have a question? You're reaching. Any others? Do you guys have any questions? Yeah. I probably would have before COVID. So when I started taking it, Chubb's cut down their travel quite a bit, but there are people who travel immensely. I know people who travel like 300,000 miles a year, but there are opportunities to travel specifically within Chubb. They have specific programs that actually let people, if you were interested in going and doing work internationally and living in a different international, like living in Singapore, working in London, they have programs that help people move around. And one thing that I've really loved about Chubb is their flexibility of letting me be who I am and encourage me to go somewhere that doesn't, that might not just fit your broader, we all think about ladders within a corporate environment, but Chubb lets you move around. I've seen so many people move around and be able to take opportunities that aren't always there. I work with a lady, she used to work in North America. She was in predictive modeling. She went into a stint as an actuary because she was taking a bunch of exams and felt like she does it. She lives in London now, right? And she helps lead their analytics over in London. And I work with her quite a bit. Like ton of movement. I knew we had a guy, he was from, where was he from? Vietnam. He did an internship with us, loved him, hired him. He lives in Singapore. I had a boss, did international business. She was my first boss. She was from Argentina, worked in Travelers. That was the insurance company I was thinking of. Worked in Travelers, came to Chubb, worked in the US majority of her life, lives in Singapore, runs the international business over there. Like my old boss worked in the US, did insurance all the time, was a consultant for a while, came to work for Chubb. She used to live in Singapore for a year to do some analytics work over there and help manage that opportunity that she wanted, and that Chubb created an opportunity for her, and she was able to do it. That is the kind of flexibility that Chubb offers that I've seen, right? They give it to those who perform and are willing to do it, but being able to do that type of stuff, like that's why I say, like working with people internationally, being able to have those opportunities, they exist, and they have a lot of rotation programs to get people around. And if people are interested, most people usually will try to find a way to help you succeed in that. So that's kind of cool that way. Yeah.
Travel a lot. I was wondering how much your work
I'll take it both ways. When I went to the office, when I didn't go to the office. Okay. When I was going to the office, I loved my work-life balance. It was great. If you're like, you still got to be willing to put in the work. I wasn't showing up at 8 and going home at 5, right? I was putting in long hours some days, you know, but as an overall aspect, I had a lot of flexibility to do what I wanted. You know, I usually worked from home once a week anyway, when I was first doing it. And so that was really nice. Now I work. So family life balance, it's there. It's not perfect. I think it's a consistent thing. So I have 3 kids. Okay. I have a 7-week-old, and that just throws a whole, like, it's just a relearn. So it's just a relearn anyway, right? So I'm just like, I figured out my work-life balance with 2 kids. I figured out with 1 kid, now 2, and now I'm trying to figure it out with 3, right? To me, a work-life balance is a distinction between home and work. And I work from home, so that distinction is a lot harder to get, right? But that's how I see my work-life balance, and that's how my wife sees it. Because when I'm on emails and that, you know, and stuff like that, when I shouldn't be, in her opinion, that's not my balance aspect. But as an insurance aspect, hour-wise, you're not putting in a ton, like, you're not putting in overtime like crazy, and you're not working like nuts, right? You're not working a 40-hour week. You're paid not, you know, some people consider that. If that's what you're looking for, Chubb's not your answer. I'll tell you that right now, right? There's some people I know that start 8, leave 5. That doesn't go for me, right? So it's not completely that structured, but you have a lot of flexibility in what you do. And, you know, my work-life balance, they give me the flexibility to have it. And that was nice. Even when I was in the office, when I needed to work from home to figure stuff out, I could. And there was a lot of flexibility and not a lot of concern that way. So that was a good question. Anything else?
Anything else on your end then? Any final words? I think we're just about wrapping up.
Yeah, I was.
Anything you wish you would have learned in school that you didn't get? I mean, you had a different route with the math stats and then kind of the finance on the side. Do you feel like you were
Prepared?
or is there anything that you would have wished you had more of when you went out?
I wish I had more. If I think about experiences, which I think the business department's doing a lot better than it was, but I think you guys, any opportunity you get to get out of the classroom type of setting and be able to apply yourself in a real life application, that's where I would suggest. That's what I wish I had more of.
Maybe even more internships or more.
Something like that, right? I wish I had real life experiences, because that's like when I first started Chubb, that's where I felt like was like a complete eye opener. Was like, oh, this is how life really works. Like this isn't a classroom. This isn't a project that I go get a grade on. This is actually something that's legit, right? And being able to get that experience, I just think it just gives your mind and your understanding so much more to be like, this is what the world really is like, and this is how problem solving and everything gets applied, right? I just wish I had more of that stuff as a background.
Any final questions? All right, I'm gonna put your information online so they can reach out to you, right?
Yeah.
Is that all right?
You can always reach out. I'll respond. Might give me a day, but I'll respond to you.
Great, thank